Okay, Bruchim Habayim to everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Eli Kajdan, class of 1986. I believe there's at least one more person here from the class of 1986. Thank you very much, Leah. It is tremendously gratifying, exciting to see so many Maimonides alums gather here today for our alma mater 75th anniversary. I think the fact that 15% of our school's alums live in Israel speaks volumes about Maimonides. And the fact, if my statistics are not wrong, and somebody tried to correct me already, that the fact that of the 50 2012 graduates, 41 are in Israel this year, I think that's probably a world record. Class of 2012, are you here? Yeah? Can't hear? Yeah, very good. Excellent. Being that it's Rosh Chodesh Adar, I would like to share with you a famous, albeit perhaps a slightly apocryphal Maimonides story. A couple of Maimonides grads, upon graduation, they decided that it would be great if every decade they could get together, go out to a restaurant, have a few beers, proverbially, relive the old days in order to keep their friendship alive. Naturally, they choose Reuben's Deli, Harvard Street. Where else? Naturally. There we go. Reuben's, by the way, celebrating 85 years, I'm told. When they're in their 20s, they go there because, the prices are decent. They don't mind if you ask for an extra plate or two to split that deli sandwiches. And they have a bunch of pretty cheap beers on tap, which are okay when you're in your 20s. In the 30s, they go there because it's kid-friendly. The carpets are kacha kacha, as we say. Noise is not really a distraction. It's really a kid-friendly kind of environment. In the 40s and the 50s, they go there because, the deli is good. The pickles are good. The atmosphere is pretty okay. And at the end of the day, for a decent price, you actually get a pretty decent single malt at Reuben's. In the 60s, when they're in their 60s, they go there because, the parking lot is actually near the entrance, and the restrooms, are near the dining facilities. In their 70s and 80s, they go there, of course, because it's all on one level. It's only 3 steps up, and it's actually wheelchair accessible. And when they're in their 90s, they go there, because they've never been there before. In a sense, Maimonides today, I think, is in a place it has never been before. Or perhaps more correctly, it's continually changing and developing every decade, perhaps every year, building upon the foundations of the past. Maimonides today is certainly not the Maimonides of 75 years ago when it was established by the Rav and Rebbetzin Soloveitchik. It's not the same Maimonides that I entered 38 years ago, not the same Maimonides from which I exited 27 years ago. It's probably not the same Maimonides of 10 years ago. From a student body of a few dozen students, it has an enrollment today of 550 students. From faculty of 12 to faculty of over 100. From initial building that was built in the early 60s of 20,000 square feet, there are now 6 buildings of 100,000 square feet. From a small budget originally, a budget of $12.5 million, including $4 million in financial aid. And of course, from an initial dream of the Rav and the Rebbetzin, it developed over the years into a cutting-edge center of learning, providing an unparalleled level of Jewish and secular education to the broadest spectrum of Jewish students from the Boston area. All this while imbuing its students with a love of Torah, Jewish traditions, preparing them academically for the best colleges in the world, and strongly encouraging them to take an active role in local chesed activities. There's a famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avot in Perek Bet, which discusses the 5 students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And it weighs them, basically puts them on a scale and weighs them out to see who is the most prominent one, who's the most serious one. And it seems from the Mishnah that 2 stand out. It's either Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkunus, who's defined as a bor sud she'eino me'abed tipa, a cemented pit which never loses a drop, or Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, who is defined as a Mayan Hamidgaber, a vibrant and rushing stream. And the discussion in the Mishnah is predicated basically upon the question, what is more important in education? Encyclopedic knowledge of texts, perfect retention, ability to transfer knowledge from generation to generation perfectly without losing anything on the way, or originality, creativity, mastering of tools which will let you build upon knowledge. And this was particularly important in Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai's time because it was after Churban Abayit. He was setting up a new center of learning in Yavne, and he had to decide which of these traits would be the most important applicable in different conditions, encyclopedic knowledge of text or innovation and creativity. And what is interesting is that when we look years later to see what happened to these two giants, it turns out that neither of these two paradigms prevailed. In a sense, both Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkonos and Rabbi Elazar ben Erech failed to become the Talmidim Mufhakim of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkonos, the one who had the encyclopedic body of knowledge, perhaps photographic memory, was ostracized from the leadership of his community after the famous story of Tanuro Shel Achnai, when he was not willing to accept the decisions of all of his community and his colleagues, invoking extranatural forces, including a bat kol mishamayim, to his side, only to be told, lo b'shamayim hi. He certainly had the corpus of knowledge, but in real life, that was not sufficient. And the end story of Rabbi Elazar ben Arach is also very sad. After the Churban, all the great leaders of the Jewish community were heading to Yavne. And the Midrash Rabbah tells us that he, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, decided to go to a place called Emmaus, near Latrun of today, where the waters were good. And there he waited. And when the rabbis of Yavne implored him to join them, he decided that they should come to him, not vice versa. Do the mice go after the bread, or does the bread go to the search for mice, he asked. And so he waited and waited and waited until we are told that he lost all of his capacity for learning. When he was called up to the Torah to read in Parshat Bo, we are told that he misread the words HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem as HaCharesh Haya Libam, were their heart's deaf. The Mayan HaMidgaber, the vibrant, rushing stream, possessing all this necessary tools of reason, deduction, ability to compare and contrast, interpolate and extrapolate, is portrayed as a person of great gaiva, pretentiousness, hubris, ultimately bringing to his downfall. And what is really interesting, I think, is that the student who seems to come out the most successful one, really the Talmid Mufhag of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, is Rabbi Yoshua ben Hanania, the one who's described somewhat enigmatically in the Mishnah as Ashrei Yoladeto. Fortunate is she who gave birth to him. The Midrashim explain that his mother used to cart him around in his stroller to places of study, to place him physically in the right environment and atmosphere for him to intake the air of learning almost by osmosis. Maimonides school, as I remember it, and perhaps as I experienced it, was a place that created the right atmosphere with some excellent, top-notch teachers, incredible role models, in an attempt to afford each of its students, each of us, an opportunity to gain as much as possible from the experience. This evening is an evening of celebration of our 75th anniversary, of reminiscence of what the school is about and was about, and we're going to start it off with a short video, I hope. Video?
Behar Hashem Umi Yakum Bimkam Kadsho Mi Yaleh Behar Hashem Umi Yakum Bimkam Kadsho Mi Yaleh Behar Hashem Umi Yakum Bimkam Kadsho Mi Yaleh Behar Hashem Umi Yakum Bimkam Kadsho La 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 la. Mi Yaleh Behar Hashem Umi Yakum Bimkam Kadsho La 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 la
Thank you very much for everybody who sent in photos. A special thanks to Mike Rosenberg from Boston, who's in the midst of a snowstorm that many of you guys were actually not alive when the last one was like that. In 1978, in the midst of a snowstorm, who remembers the 78 snowstorm? Oh, pretty good, pretty good, pretty good. The celebration that we're having today was supposed to be, I don't even know if it's happening in tandem with the celebration that's supposed to be in Boston today as well, part of a number of celebrations and events that are taking place this year in honor of the 75th anniversary. You will notice that you have a card with that you received together with all the information, with all your materials, as Maimonides Alumni Commemoration of Rav Soloveitchik's 20th yahrzeit, taking place on April 10th. When you turn to the other side of the card, you have an opportunity to sponsor a part of this event. Please take the opportunity to do so sometime during this evening. Thank you very much for the amazing, amazing video. Moving on to the next section, we're going to call up three people, three different generations, to reminisce a little bit, tell a little bit of what they remember from Maimonides from graduating in 1956, 1991, and 2012, respectively. We'll start off with 1956, I'm sorry. I want to introduce Rabbi Yitzchak Rubin. Rabbi Yitzchak Rubin was one of our 6 graduates in 1956. He holds an MA in Jewish philosophy, an MS in psychology, and a PhD in comparative religion. He volunteered as a chaplain during the Vietnam War and then was a rabbi in Pennsylvania for 10 years prior to making Aliyah in 1978. While serving as a Mefakech from Misrad HaChinuch, he was a faculty member of the RCA Ulpan for Conversion, prepared successfully more than 130 people for Giyur in this wonderful country of ours, and still anxious to contribute more to Israeli society, became a Moreh Derech for Christian tour groups and for Marot Chayalot, and prepared Israeli soldiers for crowd control and disaster victim identification even before the advent of the Zaka organization. He's married to Sharon, who joins us, I believe, this evening, and is the father of 3 children and 12 grandchildren. Rabbi Rubin, please.
I'd like to share with you that I believe that we are a unique group of people. you and I, we who studied in Maimonides and graduated from the school, we may be separated from each other in time and decades, but we share together that we are living testimony that Rav Soloveitchik did not spend his time in vain. The doctrine of Torah and Derech Eretz is more than words, more than a cliche, more than a mantra. It is possible to have a harmonious relationship between Torah and secular studies, between Torah and the world of America, and between Torah and modernity. This was a dream that the Rav had. I entered Maimonides in September of 1942 when the school was on Columbia Road in Dorchester. 14 girls and boys in my kindergarten class. I graduated Maimonides in June of 1956 in Intervale Street Synagogue building in Roxbury. There were 6 of us: Herbie Millen, Moshe Pasek, myself, Yitzhak Rubin, Edie Bramson, Janice Stern, and Ilona Meiselman, the Rav's niece. Why do I say that we are a unique group? We represent the fulfillment of a dream and a vision held by Rav Soloveitchik and his wife. They believed that it was possible to transplant European Jewry to New England, to transfer Torah values and Torah knowledge to young American-born children whose minds were on Fenway Park, on the Celtics and the Bruins. And yet, he had the dream. They believed it was possible to produce generations of native-born American youngsters who would read Emerson and Longfellow and Shakespeare, and at the same time have proficiency in Chumash with the Ramban, as Rabbi Simon taught us, Siddur, as Rabbi Wolgemuth taught us, Brachos and the Halachot of Sukkot and Kashrut. All this was a dream that faced 2 very strong obstacles. It was the Depression years of America in 1937-38. People contributed weekly 25 cents, a half a dollar, maybe $1. Can you imagine a Gadol in Torah like the Rav having to face the problem of the building, the faculty, heating in the winter? All this constituted major cajoling. It must have been very demeaning for the Rav and his wife to convince people to support Maimonides. The second problem was to gain the trust of parents to enroll their children in the school. My mother was emphatically told by relatives and neighbors, Mrs. Rubin, don't you dare send your son to Maimonides. You will ghettoize him. He will never know how to speak English. He will never know how to live with the Gentiles. I must tell you that Baruch Hashem, I can speak English. I can lecture to Christian groups and to university students and seminary students, and I do not live in a ghetto. The Maimonides school that I grew up in was a small school, but it was more than a building with classrooms and an auditorium. I remember the relationship with the teachers, with Rabbi Simon and Rabbi Wolgemuth. They did not teach a subject. They taught people. They taught young students. Their imprint is upon me to this day. They communicated love and concern for each of us in their class. And those of you who are lucky to have had them will understand why I tell you they were role models for me in my life. Maimonides was a small school, yet there was a closeness between the students. What created this in those years, in the 1950s, was that B'nai Akiva was the youth group as if it was the youth group of Maimonides. The Rabbeim of Maimonides would give shiurim to B'nai Akiva. We held our meetings in the school. For me, the highlight of the week was on Motzei Shabbat, when I would go with my father to listen to the Rav Soloveitchik's Chevra Shas class. 1 hour was in Gemara, and 1 hour was in the Parsha. In those days, he delivered his shiur in Yiddish. I sat taking notes, writing everything in English, and to this day I have notes. It was only many years after graduating Maimonides that I realized that Rav Soloveitchik, Rosh Yeshiva, Jewish philosopher, orator, lecturer, and thinker, was first and foremost a gambler. He gambled that it was possible to translate his dreams of Maimonides into a reality. When I was in the 10th grade, on a wintry night, 1953, He dramatically one Saturday night described that Nachshon ben Aminadav was the one who took us out of Egypt and opened the waters of the Red Sea. And he looked at everyone, and dramatically he asked, did Nachshon ben Aminadav take a tape measure to measure the depth of the water? Did he take a thermometer to see if it was cold, or did he jump in? Yes, he jumped in, and when he was up to the knees in the water, they parted. So you can understand how amazing it was for Rav Soloveitchik and his wife, who jumped in Dorchester and Roxbury to create a co-ed school in which boys and girls would learn Torah together, to bring to Boston Yirei Shamayim like Rabbi Wolgemuth and Rabbi Simon from Germany and from Mir. They were steeped in Torah, in Mussar, in Derech Eretz, and this they imparted to all of us. Once when Rav Soloveitchik came to our class and asked a question on the Gemara, it was Edie Bramson, who knew and read the Tosfos better than the boys. And I still remember the smile on the Rav's face. Tonight, we celebrate the forward-thinking achievement of Maimonides, the emphasis on Torah knowledge combined with academic excellence. None of this would have been a possibility without the weighty authority of the Gadol Hador of Soloveitchik. I have his signature on two documents. One is my smicha, the other is my graduation for Maimonides. The Gadol Hador, who had a revolutionary approach to modernity, allowed the full powering and flowering of a generation of men and women and achievements that are unparalleled. It is unbelievable that in Shemayim tonight he's looking down at us and quelling and having nachas because we are here in Eretz Yisrael, part of the drama of the Jewish people returning to Eretz Yisrael. May the school continue to inspire future generations to aspire to their highest potential of young men to reach achievement unparalleled. May the school continue to inspire future generations to aspire to the highest potential. I'm proud to be an alumnus.
Thank you, Rabbi Rubin. Our second speaker of the next generation is Eli Gertel. Eli is a member of a graduating class of 1991. He spent 13 years as a student in... 13 years? I thought you were good. Oh, from kindergarten through 12th grade, sorry. He currently lives with his wife and 5 children in Alon Shvut, and Eli's connection to the school runs very deep in his family, as his mother, Riva Gertel, is a 1968 graduate and is past president of the PTA and Women's Auxiliary. Riva's father, Abe Lavavet Zal, was the president of the school for over 30 years and was a pillar of the Boston Jewish community from the time he moved with his family to Brookline in 1967. Eli, bakasha.
Memories of my experiences in Maimonides range from classes with Mrs. Weeder and Mrs. Abelo to Mr. Dagnelli, or more fondly, Mr. D, Rabbi Erlovitz, Zichrono Livracha, Mr. Shaket, and Ms. Steif, Aleh Shalom. Clearly, some elicit different memories than others. After all, I brought my class SAT average down, not up, and therefore have fonder memories of the basketball court than English literature. However, the one constant theme that comes to mind every time I think back is the warmth and comfort I felt within the confines of the school. Similar to the saying that you never know what you have until it's gone, Maimonides to me, even so many years later, reminds me of a safe haven that one feels when thinking of their home, parents, and upbringing. I would go so far as to say that it's not the memories per se that I think of when I reminisce about box ball, MCAT basketball, class trips, or Mr. D's pillow polo tournaments. It's not just the late night Mr. Cohen 11th grade chemistry classes, or the Sunday morning Rabbi Stein physics refresher courses. It's not even the meaningful trip to DC to gather for the massive protest for Soviet Jewry, or trying to figure out whether Rabbi Stein and Dr. Stein were really long-lost relatives. Rather, it's what those memories elicit within me when reminiscing about life so many years ago. It's going to that place in my heart that inherently provides warmth, comfort, and security, which I often use today to combat life's moments of coldness, challenge, and difficulty. It's reminiscing about a past that, although no longer exists as it once did for me, is so strong that the school is still providing that safe haven for today's student body. Perhaps that's why there are so many people here right now. Perhaps that's why tonight's attendance is so large. I believe that we are all here tonight not just to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the school, not to just see old faces. Rather, tonight's attendance is so we can each confide in one another, discussing a time in our lives that remains so special. Some of you may not know this, but Jay Solomon organized this entire event. He was originally planning for 40 to 50 people. When I met with Jay and Rabbi Shapiro a few weeks ago, our tally then was nowhere near the turnout tonight. It's clear that Maimonides School elicits similar emotions amongst all the people in this room. I mean, everyone likes to talk about the incredibly important impact Maimonides and the Rav had on the Boston community and on the greater American Orthodox scene. His importance should always be recognized and should never be underappreciated. The Rav by himself became a pillar that changed 20th century Jewry. I'm sure that most people feel very proud of having attended the school in which such a giant like the Rav invested so much effort to build. However, I would go so far as to say that even the Rav had a fondness for Maimonides different from other institutions he helped to build. My grandfather, Abe Lubavitch, Zechrono Livracha, always spoke of the Rav on the one hand in New York and the Rav on the other hand in Boston. People in Boston weren't familiar with the tough, rigorous teacher and Rebbe that so many in YU spoke of. The Rav in Boston was a softer, patient, and warm man who used to love walking through the halls of Maimonides speaking to the children. As a young child, when I lived across the street from him on Somerset Road, he insisted that I take payment for shoveling snow from his walkway. There was something different. There was a warmth, there was a connection to home. People such as my grandfather, Mr. Lubavitch, Mr. Saval, Mr. Feuerstein, Judge Fox, Mr. Brenner, Mr. Solomon, Mr. Kerr, and countless others felt what we are all feeling now. For me, it's the blend of the memories and the utter enjoyment I have when thinking about Rabbi Walgermuth's Shabbat afternoon Gemara classes, Mr. D's physical fitness awards, or Rabbi Bloomberg's double Gemara class followed by Jewish history, which I think we used to call triple boomer. It was home for me. It was a community and even a world that made sense to me. It didn't know of the challenges of the outside world. It insulated me from the unfairness and pain that life sometimes brings. This, I believe, is the reason for such a strong turnout tonight. It's to say thank you for the cocoon that we all have inside of us called Maimonides School. And for this, I say thank you, Jay and Rabbi Shapiro, for allowing me to speak tonight. And thank you all for allowing me to share this wonderful experience, reminiscing about a place and time that is so dear to me.
Thank you very much, Eli. Our third speaker, member of the graduating class of 2012, very good, is Tessa Mewood. She's here for the year, like most of her colleagues from Maimonides, learning this year in Migdal Oz. Tessa, b'kasha.
When I was first asked to share my thoughts tonight, I was nervous that I wasn't up to the task. My memories of Maimo are still fresh. I knew I could speak with ease about Shabbat afternoon hangouts, water fights, class trips, and school days that extended way past sundown. But I've only been a MIMO alumna for a few months. How can I stand here and explain how MIMO contributed to my life? I'm studying at Migdal Oz now, and I'm starting Penn in the fall, so I graduated with a fantastic 5-year plan. But what else did I get from Maimonides? Even before I knew why, I was instilled with a sense of pride that I was a Maimonides student. I can't even spell Maimonides without cheering it and hearing the "let's go" in my head, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. I remember a 5th grade math team sitting around a table as we took turns competing. A group of students from another school walked in speaking Mandarin. We immediately switched to Hebrew, wanting to distinguish ourselves. אנחנו גם יכולים לשחק את המשחק הזה, אנחנו מדברים עברית. We laughed, cherishing our uniqueness, feeling pride in our community. In middle school, we showed our Boston pride. On our 8th grade trip, we happened to be in DC at the same time as the Red Sox. In the middle of the Sox-Orioles game, the DJ started playing Sweet Caroline. Nothing could have made us happier. Everyone was standing on their seats in Red Sox gear, singing along, showing our Boston pride. We should have known better. A few seconds in, they flashed, "Yeah, right," across the screen, as if they would really let us boast. But even in just those few seconds, it was clear how proud we were of where we came from. We were proud to be Jewish, proud to be from Boston. We showed this pride even before we understood it, before we could grasp the magnitude of the legacy we carried. It wasn't really until high school that I began appreciating the value of the education I was receiving and the community that was raising me. When my 10th grade Talmud teacher proposed a midterm, our class followed MIMO Protocol 101 and begged for a project instead. Little did we know that our A's weren't going to come so easy. Somehow, between blasting music in the library and Facebooking, we all managed to turn out serious papers, examining a halacha through its Tanakh source, the Mishnah, Gemara, Rishonim, and Achronim. We spent weeks working on papers that we could be proud of. We didn't only work on our technical skills. By the end of the project, we had learned to have meaningful, respectful conversations about Torah, to work with our peers to achieve, to present our ideas, and to love what we were doing. Engrossing ourselves so completely in the world of halacha helped us to come away proud of our Judaism and proud of the roles we knew we would one day play in the modern Orthodox world. The emphasis on working together and respecting our peers was equally, if not more prominent in extracurricular activities. As the member of a Maimonides team, one is not only taught the necessary skills to achieve, but to behave in a way that is a Kiddush Hashem. And yes, this is where I'm going to talk about mock trial. Last year, we made it to the semifinal round of the state tournament, an accomplishment I am extremely proud of. I am prouder, however, of one of our earliest trials of the season. We defeated our opponents, a first-year team, with ease. That night, I received an email from the coach telling us that the other team had gone out of their way to thank her for the experience of competing against us, because they felt that despite their lack of training, we had been respectful, good sports, and they looked forward to competing against Maimonides in the future. I probably won't always remember the hearsay rules or how to pose a successful objection, but shaking my opponent's hand at the end of a competition is something I will never forget. I still take pride in having been part of a team that holds itself to such a high standard of behavior. While my learning was guided by the school, it was strengthened by my wonderful classmates. Our class formed such a strong community that even as I talk about my experiences, I have trouble differentiating between the we and the I. These are my own experiences, but they are completely intertwined with our collective experience as a grade and a school. As we approached graduation, everyone worried what would happen to our class. We were about to separate for the first time to start at various yeshivas, seminaries, universities, and programs. One thing I have realized over the past few months is that I will never lose my title of MIMO Kid. We have split up and taken separate paths, but they all originated from the same place. Our shared background imparted in us a shared set of ideals. I'm glad that my Maimonides background didn't only supply me with the necessary tools to leave high school. It gave me a history to cherish and a community that I can be proud of.
Thank you very much, Tessa. Before I introduce our next speaker, I think it's important for all of us to pay tribute to 3 people, in addition to the Rav and Rebbetzin Soloveitchik, with whom Maimonides simply would not have been what it is. We saw their faces in the presentation. Rabbi Rubin mentioned them, but I think it's important to mention them by name. And I'm referring to Rabbi Wolgemuth Zal, Rabbi Cohen Zal, and Rabbi Simon Zal. These three giants of Torah, and no less importantly of Kavod HaBriot, left an indelible mark on hundreds and perhaps thousands of us. At the same time, I also want to express our sympathy to the extended Halfinger family, who lost both Rabbi Halfinger and Bracha Tal over the course of the past year. Yeh Zichram Baruch. And of course, we send our condolences here to the Hartman family on the passing of Rabbi David Hartman, a Talmud of the Rav, earlier this morning. As we approach the Rav's 20th yahrzeit in 6 weeks, it bears stating publicly that he declared on more than one occasion that he regarded Maimonides School as one of his most gratifying accomplishments, and believe me, he had many of them. It's profoundly meaningful that Rebbetzin Tova Lichtenstein honors us with her presence today, and all the more so by participating in the program. Among her many prestigious accomplishments, Dr. Lichtenstein was professor of social work at Bar-Ilan University for many years. But more importantly, however, she's a proud alumna of Maimonides, having graduated from our 9th grade before the high school was established. B'kasha.
Good evening. I'm very happy to be here, and I wear, despite this one hat, I think I have another hat. I have one hat that I entered Maimonides in September 1940. I think that's probably before a very long time ago. Only Yitzhak Rubin here, I think, he'd compete a little bit with me. And we were in the Young Israel of Roxbury. We were in 98 Washington Street. I was in the first, 7th grade. We were in Young Israel of Mattapan. And it was a small class. There were 6 children. And I think in some way we had a unique experience, very different from the experience that was described here by the other alumni. But I really want to come here to talk a little bit about the people that founded Maimonides. And I think we owe tribute to them too. Maimonides was founded, as Rabbi Rubin said, against the will of the Jewish community. My father was accused of ghettoizing the Jews. We had finally come out of the ghetto, and how, in heaven's name, was he going to bring them back into the ghetto? In order to get children for the school, it literally was an act of faith that families gave their children to him, in a sense. They gave them to him to study in the school. The school was founded in 1937. It was only boys. When I entered in 1940, there already were boys and girls, but the first families that sent their children to the school remained long-lived friends of the Rav. He was dedicated to them. He loved them as if they were his family members. And those families were Bramson and Millen and Bahn and Spitz. And they sent their children to a school where they weren't going to learn English, they weren't going to know anything. And they started the school. My mother did not start the school with my father. My father started it against her sage advice. Sometimes wives give sage advice to their husbands. I have a couple of very good advices that I've given to my husband, and they've all proven wrong. So my mother advised my father against opening the school, not for the reasons that the community was against them, but because she felt it was not economically responsible, because you had to pay teachers' salaries. After 3 years, she became involved in the school, and then the issue of funding the school became a most important issue. I can say here, never once were teachers not paid. Now, when you look at the history of day schools, and I'm no expert, but what I do know is there were many day schools throughout the United States where teachers were not paid, and people were owed a lot of money. And in Maimonides school, they paid the teachers weekly, not monthly. And why weekly? Because they never could collect up enough money to pay a monthly salary. They could only pay a weekly salary. And I would like to mention Mrs. Mary Paulin. I don't know who remembers her. But Mrs. Mary Collin was as responsible for the upkeep of that school as Rabbi and Mrs. Soloveitchik. There were 3 partners in that school, and there was Rabbi Soloveitchik, Mrs. Soloveitchik, and Mary Paulin. And every Wednesday, might be probably Tuesday night, my mother would call Mrs. Paulin, and my mother was a European lady, and she never called her Mary, and Mary never called her Tonya. They were Mrs. Soloveitchik and Mrs. Paulin, even though they were very good friends, and would begin, do we have a payroll? Do we have a payroll? How much do we have, and where can we get money? Can we call Mr. Klein? Mr. Hyman Klein, whose name should be mentioned also, was a man who I think was attracted by my father. He never would have started the school, but he was always willing to give money. And if you would call him, we can't make a payroll, can you give us money? And by Thursday that would begin, do we have a payroll, don't we have a payroll? I remember as a young child, all we heard in our house was payroll and Maimonides and Mrs. Paulin. And sometimes we were jealous of this other child. You know, we were 3 children, and then there was Maimonides. And it was a little hard living with Maimonides, because Maimonides had to be paid every Friday. We only had to be fed breakfast, lunch, and supper, but Maimonides had to be paid. And then they would go to take loans. They would call the bank. I remember this as a child. They would call the banks. Either Mr. Klein would take a loan, or my father would take a loan, or they would go borrow from somebody, and they would pay the salaries. And that was something that was very important. And they nurtured the school, and it became a very important part of their life. And when I left my house in the evening, I said to my husband, do you think when they founded the school, and I say they because after 2 or 3 years they worked at the school together as a couple, do you think that my parents ever thought that this school would celebrate 75 years? I can truly say to you, I don't think they did. I don't think they did. They knew they had to do it, and they did it. And then a school as a child takes on a life of its own. An institution takes on a life of its own. People take on from where they were. I think they set the basis. They gave the direction. And then the school went where it went. As a child goes where it goes. And I think as grandparents probably today, or great-grandparents, or probably great-great-grandparents of all these fine alumni here, I think they would be very proud of the school and the children that they have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lichtenstein. Our last speaker of the evening, Rabbi Shapiro, also requires no introduction. Rabbi Shapiro and I go back a ways. I'm not so sure that when Rabbi Shapiro accepted a quiet Russian immigrant kid speaking no English into 1st grade class back in 1975, he had any clue what he was getting into. The beginning, I think, was actually rather auspicious. I was actually encouraged to skip 2nd grade, going directly from 1st to 3rd, but first impressions, they say, could be rather deceiving. For some reason, over the years, Rabbi Shapiro suspended me from school more often than anybody else in my class. And I never quite understood why. Evidence of my guilt was actually rather sketchy to me. For example, the fact that my dear friend Rami Armon seemed to find himself on the wrong side of a broken window and I on the right side of it was purely coincidental in my mind. Reuven Harrow's broken foot, after a slightly unsuccessful karate move on my part, seemed to me more of a sign of his inability to react fast enough, and it was really no fault of mine. And, you know, with an orthopedist father, I really didn't think it was such a big deal, frankly. And the fact that purely coincidentally, my then girlfriend and I disappeared simultaneously for 3 hours on a school field trip to New York, and then resurfaced simultaneously again after everybody had been searching us for a couple of hours, well, I don't know, not my fault. And that was the tally just for the first half of 10th grade. Rabbi David Shapiro earned his smicha and an MA in Jewish history at YU and arrived in Boston with his wife Miriam in 1968 to continue his graduate studies at Rabbi Twersky. Once he started teaching part-time in Maimonides in 1970, he fell in love with its students and didn't emerge from Philbrook Road until 41 years later when he and Miriam made Aliyah in the summer of 2011 to join 3 of their children who live here. He's now grateful to be part of his grandchildren's daily lives, to participate in various shiurim, and to progress steadily towards his goal of publishing the Torah he was privileged to learn from the Alumni Rebbe in Boston. B'chavod, Rabbi Shapiro.
I have no memories of anything he said, really. It is truly a great pleasure to be here this evening and to experience the outpouring of affection amongst alumni for one another and between alumni and their former teachers, many of whom grace us with their presence. It is extraordinarily gratifying to learn from many of your emails over the past few weeks and from so many comments tonight of the profound gratitude toward the school that prompted so many of us, I include myself, to attend this event. Rabbi Umori, Rabbi Twersky, the Talmud Rebbe of Boston, Zatzal, cared deeply about our school and devoted boundless energy and countless hours to ensure its welfare. From the early 80s, when the Rav was no longer able to be actively involved, until the last conversation I had with the Talmud Rebbe in Elul 1997, our school was paramount amongst his many communal concerns. He always emphasized that there are no coincidences. Tonight is Rosh Chodesh Adar. What theme is common to both Purim and this alumni gathering? Well, one answer is social cohesiveness. Purim highlights unity within Jewish society. Reb Shlomo Halevi Alkavatz, the early 16th century author of Lecha Dodi, suggests in his commentary to Megillat Esther an explanation for the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. U'mishloach Manot ish lere'ehu, k'mo shehaya inyanam ki'ish echad, lehikahel kol echad im chaveiro, hefech ish tsar v'oyev ha'omer am echad mefuzar u'meforad. To paraphrase, Mishloach Manot symbolizes the united stand of the Jews, which was in stark contrast to Haman's characterization of them as a diffuse and fragmented nation. Yesterday we read Parshat Shkalim. Rav Moshe Alshich, the later 16th century exegete, commenting on the rationale for the mitzvah to donate machzit hashekel to the Mikdash, writes, Al devar shiur machzit hashekel velo shekel shalem, b'shem hachacham harav Shlomo Alkavat zichrono levracha shamati, shehu lahorot et bnei Yisrael yachas achdutam, bal ya'aleh al lev ish mehem shehu nifrad mechaveiro, kol echad chatzi, ubehitchabro im kol echad ve'echad meYisrael naaseh echad shalem. Again, to paraphrase, I heard in the name of Rab Shlomo Alkavatz, he is the one whose explanation for Mishloach Manot we just cited, that each Jew donated only half shekel in order to express his awareness that he is incomplete without his fellow Jew. It takes the cooperation of two Jews to form a whole shekel. This symbolizes the overall unity of Klal Yisrael and the interdependence of all Jews on one another. So the conjunction of yesterday's Parshat Shekalim, our forthcoming celebration of Purim, and this evening's alumni reunion symbolizes our united dedication to Rav Soloveitchik's values as we encountered them through Maimonides School. We hope that most of you will be able to join us for an evening of tribute to his memory in 2 months on Rosh Chodesh Iyar, Wednesday evening, April 10th. Please note it's on the card that you have in your program, as we mark his 20th yahrzeit with a presentation by his grandson, Rav Meir Lichtenstein, on implications of the Rav's worldview for contemporary Israeli society. And as you see on the card, it is scheduled to be held on the campus of Amalia High School in Givat Mordechai. The details are there. But we ask you, please, on your way out after Ma'ariv in a few minutes, upstairs, because it's awkward here to do it, we'll gather upstairs for Ma'ariv and Ellie will close the program. Please return the card on your way out, indicating whether at this moment, we'll send follow-up emails, but it would help us to begin to get a sense of how many people think that they might be able to join us for that evening, because as happened this time, as the numbers grew, we had to, for example, we didn't intend to rent this hall, and we had to do so to accommodate the crowd. Thank God, it's a wonderful problem to have. We would like to be able to begin to anticipate the number of participants for the presentation by Rav Meir, so that we can also make sure that we've arranged proper accommodations. Thank you each and every one of you, for contributing by your presence to such a meaningful and gratifying evening.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Shapiro. With this, pretty much our program is almost over. Immediately after singing Hatikva, the reception will resume upstairs in the lobby, socializing, beverages, and of course, very important to fill out the cards that Rabbi Shapiro mentioned. I want to use the opportunity again to thank each and every single one of you for coming here this evening. I think it shows clearly that we didn't necessarily have to wait 75 years to have our first alumni gathering of Israeli alumni of Maimonides, and of course our hope is that we'll do this much, much more frequently. Thank you very, very much. And please stand up for Hatikva.